Our Black Sheep series focuses on films that don't get a fair shake, the ones that may get dogged on but deserve a second chance. It's my favorite kind of movie, and they're the ones that need us to spread the word. And spread it we shall. Hey friends, I'm Tyler Nichols with JoBlo, and thank you so much for joining me on this journey through underrated horror flicks. We've got quite the lineup. Set against the backdrop of urban decay and gentrification, Wolfen follows Albert Finney as he discovers that a string of mysterious murders were not the work of a human. It's got just the right blend of crime, drama, supernatural horror, and social commentary. And because one werewolf is never enough, we've got Christopher Lee fighting werewolf nuns in The Howling II, Your Sister is a Werewolf. You know, I've never actually seen this film, and this video is enough to convince me that that needs to change. Finally, we're heading into the world of vampires, as we discover that Jerry Dandridge actually had a sister, and she's pretty pissed. Now Charlie Brewster and Peter Vincent, great vampire hunter, have to join forces to stop yet another one in Fright Night Part 2. So let's watch these videos from Andrew Hatfield as we take a look at The Howling II, Wolfen, and Fright Night Part 2.
A black sheep doesn't have to be considered bad to have that loving title and distinction. I mean, some of them are considered quite bad and need layers peeled down to show the good inside. There are other cases though. A movie can be a black sheep if it was buried by a more popular outing like The Last Broadcast being utterly forgotten after the behemoth Blair Witch made its appearance. Sometimes, like The Last Broadcast, it can just be buried within its own genre, decade, year, or as in today's title, all three. I've seen more than a few comments for this one, so let's take a look at Werewolves in 1981. No, not that one. The other one. No, not that one either. The other wolf movie of 1981. Michael Walde's Wolfen. I would imagine that most, if not all of us, watching this video grew up with one or two of the werewolf movies of 1981. Most people probably enjoy both An American Werewolf in London and The Howling, but have a preference of make and model. For me, it's An American Werewolf in London. I enjoy The Howling, especially now over 20 years after I first watched it. This is another case of my brothers, who were and still are something of gurus for me in the world of pop culture, introducing me to this. I remember finding out about it and watching The Howling in Tempe, Arizona, and wondering how I'd never seen this movie, and also not enjoying it as much as I should. It was the same as London, but different. Of course now, especially after writing our 80s horror memory episode on the two and revisiting both, I see how similar they actually are in development and behind-the-scenes stories, but also how beautifully different they both are. Beautifully different is a wonderful way to describe the other movie, however. A third wolf movie of that very year that may lack the historical attention and star power behind the camera, but packs a really nice punch nonetheless. I say wolf movie because it's not a traditional werewolf flick. While An American Werewolf in London is very traditional in terms of its monster rules, and The Howling at least adheres to the Wolfman mythos, even if it plays fast and loose with the rules. Wolfen has much more pathos and meaning that it mixes up with its pulp. While it's also based on a novel like The Howling, it sticks much closer to its source material and is as much a cop drama, environmental message, and sociological message movie as it is horror. It's admittedly a slower, drier affair than either of the other two movies in its pack, but it's well worth tracking down and gives you a completely different experience.
And now, let's hear a word from today's sponsor.
What are we gonna do? Hopefully that give you a better idea of how to deal with certain situations.
The movie starts off with a rich couple on their way home from an upscale party, and they decide to stop in Battery Park.
Stop by Battery Park.
Roger, routing change, penthouse ETA 0615.
What's Vanderveer gonna do at the Battery at 6 in the morning?
Yeah, I think that may be the hardest part to swallow of this movie over 40 years later. They are slain by something with a fun, early version of Predator vision, and even their large driver/bodyguard is taken out without much difficulty.
3 bodies. Mutilation, possible sexual assault.
A former captain of the NYPD is brought in to help solve the murders, as the yuppie couple was very high profile, and the mayor, along with the Vanderveer family's private security, believe it to be work of terrorists. The former, and now brought back current, Captain Dewey is played by Albert Finney. Finney plays the role wonderfully, with part sarcastic pessimism and part willing to believe skeptic as the events unfold. Finney may be one of the most underrated great actors of all time, as the 5-time Oscar-nominated thespian would play some larger-than-life roles, including Ebenezer Scrooge, Hercule Poirot in the star-studded Murder on the Orient Express from '74, and would end his career in a James Bond movie. For horror, well, this is about it, and even this is almost horror-adjacent enough for an actor to not consider it in the genre. He was also in the very underseen sci-fi movie Looker that is smarter today than it even was 42 years ago. The politicians also assign a criminal expert, Rebecca Neff, played by Diane Venora. Venora is much less known than Finney as the co-lead, and in fact was much less known as this was her first feature film. She would go on to appear in things like Heat, FX, and The Insider. The rest of the cast is a fun mix of character actors and stars from other walks of life. The coroner, Whittington, is played by Gregory Hines. Our lead suspect is the legendary Edward James Olmos. Tom Noonan is the helpful zoo employee, and Dick O'Neill is Dewey's boss.
How can you eat that crap?
We even get small appearances from James Tolkien and Reginald VelJohnson. While Hines is really only in this and an episode of Amazing Stories for genre film, Noonan is a damn legend in the biz with RoboCop 2, the creepy villain of Last Action Hero, Manhunter, House on the Devil, and a few more. Behind the camera, however, tells a different story. The director is Michael Waldie, who again is not a household name, and his only other major movie is Woodstock. The guy directed Woodstock. He also wrote the screenplay with David Ear, who only has a handful of other writing projects to his name. The book it's based off of, yet another adaptation I didn't know about until rewatching the movie, was written by Ridley Strieber, who also happened to write The Hunger and the book that The Day After Tomorrow was partially based on. The only screenplay that he wrote was for the adaptation of his own book The Communion, which is another fun and zany Christopher Walken role. Back to the movie, and another person is killed by an unseen creature in an old building that is set for demolition. Dewey and Diane go to investigate, and Diane is almost lured to her death by the sound of a baby when Dewey saves her only to hear howling and see the eyes of a wolf. Another man is slain, and Whittington discovers that the weapon isn't consistent with anything they've seen before, and he also finds several hairs on all the victims. This is when we're introduced to Noonan's zoologist, who says the hair and bites are without uncertainty from a wolf.
It's a carnivore. You got yourself some kind of meat eater.
He also makes a comment comparing wolves in general to Native Americans, and Dewey has a wild hair that sends him after a Native American he arrested back in the day, who was also part of a radical political movement.
Wanna talk to him? Go on up. You wanna wait? Mark's over there.
Dewey speaks to him on top of a bridge, where Eddie Holt alludes to Dewey that he can shapeshift like many of them can, and Dewey decides to tail him. Doing his own investigating, zoologist Ferguson looks for wolves in Central Park and is killed for his trouble. Dewey gets permission from his superior to do a stakeout at the abandoned building that Neff almost died at. While there's nothing in the actual building anymore, Whittington is killed after a surprise attack from a wolf, and Dewey's unable to save him in time. Shaken, he heads to the bar where Eddie Holt and his friends are. That's where they tell him the legend of the Wolfen. The Wolfen are spirit gods, and they cannot be stopped by normal men and women. Eddie tells Dewey that fighting is pointless as he isn't on the same level as the Wolfen. The Wolfen are hunters, and Dewey is merely the future dead. The spirits aren't on the prowl for random killings either. They will kill for and defend their hunting grounds, even if that means venturing out and killing the Vanderveers of the world who would take more of their land from them. It's here where everything really comes together for this movie. The characters feel more real and lived in than the other two movies. Dewey is flawed but realistic. The writers explore things like alcoholism within the Native American communities, yuppie rich culture, and terrorism. The wolves aren't makeup-laden man-wolves who rip apart everything like a hot knife through butter. They aren't objectively evil, and they are aware of what they are doing. Dewey decides he wants off the case, but he, his boss, and Neff are surrounded by the wolves who kill off Warren really quickly and really brutally.
John!
The gore in this movie is not on par with its Lycan contemporaries, but severed hands, severed heads, and the right blood spatter at the right time deliver on the horror aspect of the movie. Our surviving heroes get cornered in the now vacant penthouse of the recently deceased Vanderveers, and as they get surrounded, Dewey puts down his gun and takes out the miniature plans that would build on the spirits' hunting grounds. He chooses not to fight them, just like he was warned, and sure enough, they walk away. The rest of the police arrive, and Dewey decides to go with the narrative of the terrorism angle that the private security and mayor are pushing. Not only would he probably not be believed if he told them what really happened, but it would put the community and land in further danger. A voiceover explains that the cycle will continue both with human class warfare and the Wolfen being the higher predator on the food chain. The final image ends up being Eddie and his pack as they look out on the city on top of the bridge. Wolfen is a special combination of things that makes it essential viewing for horror fans. Like its source material cousin in The Hunger being the outcast or black sheep of the vampire subgenre, the Wolfen is the same for wolf-related horror. It's not that it's better or worse than the two heavy hitters of 1981, but it's just so damn different. It rarely even gets lumped into the horror realm because it's not exactly werewolves, and it's also not exactly the tried and true formula that The Howling and London follow. While it may not have the legacy that it deserves, it has the talent, originality, and entertainment that make it required viewing. Its original theatrical run was unfortunately a huge failure, with it only garnering $10 million on its $17 million budget. But that failure shouldn't dictate how it's seen today. It comes on a 4-pack DVD with some other underappreciated movies like Coma, Bad Moon, and the 90s remake of Body Snatchers, but it also has its own solo Blu-ray from the Warner Archive collection. Hopefully one of our physical fiends at Scream Factory or Arrow will do the right thing soon. Give Wolfen a chance with an open mind and a respect for the spirits. As my tastes change and I get a chance to watch more and more movies, largely due to wonderful companies like Severin, Vinegar Syndrome, and Synapse putting out forgotten or lost movies, I take a second look or deeper look at certain films. This also changes what I'm willing to call a black sheep. The Howling series is, well, kind of a black sheep series in horror in general. It has 8 films over a 30-year span from 1981 to 2011, and while the first one is typically held in high esteem because of its pedigree and, well, because it's good, there's a lot to watch and unpack here. You can look at which movie is the black sheep of the series, but let's get even more granular with it. Let's look at which of the 2 Howling movies directed by Philippe Mora deserves the moniker. While the third one has that specific Ozploitation fare that is admittedly I am an easy mark for, The Howling II, Your Sister is a Werewolf, has a pizzazz to it that is unmatched in mid-1980s cinema that 40 years later is a great black sheep candidate. The rights to the Howling series were kind of up in the air, and so Joe Dante was out. The writer of the Howling novels, Gary Brandner, wasn't a huge fan of the first movie or the director after Dante said that the novels were just okay and his movie improved upon the source material. This movie is a mess, and that starts with the production, as the first movie made a good amount of money, but Avco Embassy was accused by producer Stephen Lane of adding costs that may or may not have been real, and he was upset that he wasn't making any money that he thought he should have off the production. He bought out his co-producer and wanted to strike while the iron was hot, but wasn't able to make a direct sequel due to other rights issues. Lane then entered into a tenuous agreement with a production company called Hemdale Film Corporation. These guys grossly misrepresented how much money they had, and the production, as well as the script, changed multiple times. While author Brandner is credited as a screenwriter in the film, his initial script was completely changed and has almost nothing to do with either the first film or the second book in the series. This might have been rectified even with all the changes, but the author had to leave due to pressures of turning in the third book in the Howling series. Or he hated the production. Could be both. Now, it is a hot mess, but that doesn't mean the movie's bad. Oh, okay, the movie's kind of bad, but it has charm out the wazoo and is a fun kind of bad. Even with its faults, it has a few genuinely strong things going for it. The movie opens at the funeral of Karen, who is played by Dee Wallace in the first movie. We get Red Brown as Karen's brother Ben, and he ends up meeting an associate of Karen's named Jenny, and Stefan, who is not related to anyone or anything. Red Brown is a damn legend, and you could make a drinking game out of this or any other movie of his where you imbibe on something every time he screams when he does anything. Here, it's when he shoots werewolves or tackles someone. Reb is a bad movie royalty actor, with his appearances as Captain America in 2 separate films in 1979, You're the Hunter from the Future, Strike Commando, and Robo-War. But then he throws us a curveball by showing up in good stuff like Uncommon Valor and Hardcore. Dude's a mystery. Jenny is played by Annie McEnroe, who I don't recognize from much, but I did realize she is the realtor lady in Beetlejuice, and also shows up in The Survivors with Robin Williams. The strange man named Stefan is none other than genre legend Christopher Lee. Even in bad movies, he is a consummate professional and a fun watch. To name the movies that Lee is in would be an exercise in futility, and everyone has their favorites, so I'll just tie in some stories of Lee's time here. He was so disappointed with the other actors acting in this movie that he would often disassociate between takes. Director Mora also had no idea that Lee was a secret SS-killing badass, and when Lee got off the plane in Czechoslovakia, he was treated to a hero's welcome. At some point, he also took Mora on a mini tour explaining his exploits that caused the director to make a documentary about Lee in his military days. Lee also contributed to helping with issues on the production when he was able to help, in character, explain away bad special effects. Finally, when Joe Dante, who was a huge fan, cast the imposing former vampire and Bond villain in Gremlins 2, Lee apologized for his involvement in the Howling II. Stefan explains that Ben's sister, as the movie suggests, was a werewolf, although that explanation also extends to Stefan and the main villain Striba being siblings when she is actually the queen of the werewolves. He shows Ben and Jenny the tape of the broadcast where Karen changed into a lichen and was killed, but he needs her to be put to her final rest. One of the stupidly fun aspects of this movie is that the original script was geared towards vampires, and while they moved it over to a different old-school monster, they didn't change a lot of the surrounding parts, including Transylvania and how you're supposed to dispatch the threats. Stefan meets the other two at Karen's grave and tries to kill her again, but is interrupted by a group who follow Striba. Striba's character involvement had the movie receive a couple different names they toyed around with too, including Howling II, Striba, Werewolf Bitch, which sounds like something they would make up for a fake preview in Grindhouse, but you would have also an amazing title there. The trio go off to hunt Striba, who is creating an army of super sexy werewolves and clearly must be stopped. The music is also shockingly appropriate and decent here. The score itself by Stephen Parsons works in nearly every scene, and then you have the punk club. The scene works on so many levels, but just seeing cool 1980s Christopher Lee in his shades is worth the price of admission, and yes, he does pull it off. The club and music from the band Babel comes back in a very hilarious but problematic end credits sequence. You see, Striba is played by Sybil Danning, who was a B-movie queen and quite often nude, both in the pages of Playboy and on screen. For this movie, she'd grown tired of being naked so often and got the producers to agree to only one nude scene where you can see anything. She's in strange leather or covered in wolf fur for the rest of it. The scene is clear as day and has the nudity that she agreed to, but when the producers called Mora when they were working on the end credits, they asked if he thought it was okay to run the scene of her topless again, and he said it was probably fine. What he, and certainly Sybil, didn't know was that they were going to run the clip 17 times during the course of the credits. Yeesh.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
Sybil is known for more than just this though, as she can be seen in other fun genre work like Malibu Express, The Tomb, and the TV miniseries V. She was also in the first 2 Oliver Reed Musketeer films that, well, also had Christopher Lee, and newer horror directors like Rob Zombie would put her in projects like the 2007 remake of Halloween. While I would agree with Lee that the acting isn't great here, it's part of the charm, with Danning and Brown particularly looking like they are having a damn blast. The trio meet a bunch of local villagers who are part of the group that have sworn to oppose Striba because she has killed parts of their families for generations. Ben finds the castle that Striba is at, but also loses a partner named Vasily, while Jenny is also captured. Streba is able to reanimate Vasily and use him to attempt to kill Stefan before Reb absolutely destroys him by tackling him out a window and onto a spiked gate. Another thing to discuss that actually works really well besides the score are the effects, and those shouldn't have been as good as they are. Okay, good's a strong word, but they are fun as heck and some of the more entertaining looking kills of the 80s. The special effects were severely hampered by budget, and many of those cool kills were added after principal filming had ended. The gore is more than sufficient, and it's really funny in a good way to watch the hastily put together dummies get absolutely wrecked by bat creatures or magic that makes their eyes pop out of their sockets. The werewolves were a big part of what made the first movie so cool, with their transformations to the way they walked and even stood. Here, though, oh boy, they did what they could. They were sent a box from 20th Century Fox that was labeled Planet of the Apes, and that's exactly what they received. You'll see a lot of the wolves clothed or only partially visible or just naked with the focus on the human nudity. They did what they could with what they had, and Lee added a line about werewolves devolving from humans, which adds a little credence to the apes thing. The heroes end up at the castle and grounds with a handful of them dying, but ultimately killing Streba. How it happens is irrelevant, as there is a section with Reb Brown screaming as he kills more werewolves than Rambo kills soldiers, and teams up with Christopher Lee in a tag team that I did not have on my bingo card. Streba is able to kill Sybil, but also sacrifices himself in a very unconvincing fire, but that's what happens, I guess, when it's the Howling II and your sister's a werewolf. Jenny and Ben go back home, now kind of a couple, and we get a bizarre ending that happens when you don't know how to end a movie. I say that, but it's also the only part of the original script from screenwriter Robert Sarno, who originally wanted his movie to be a comedy. Sarno only has this and one other movie to his name. The entire Howling series deserves a once-over, even if it's the first one that's the only one people are willing to talk about. There just aren't enough werewolf movies out there, and we still aren't getting great ones, as evidenced by the recently released The Wolfman from Lee Winnell and Blumhouse. While the rest of the series doesn't deserve its day in the sun like this one, I'd highly recommend buying the new 4K from Vinegar Syndrome that shows this hot mess in the best quality possible. The Howling II is enjoyable trash of the highest quality. With all due respect to the vampire western Near Dark and the coolness of The Lost Boys, my favorite 80s vampire flick is pretty easily Fright Night. It has a way about it that's just unmatched. It's able to mix the 80s setting, think Jerry in the Club hypnotizing Amy, with both a modern and classic feel. It's almost the evolutionary step of what Hammer Films would have turned into had they not folded. It's certainly beloved enough with its own documentary and a sequel, remake, and sequel to the remake. That's what I wanted to talk about today. While Near Dark got no sequel, probably for the best, and The Lost Boys got multiple awful sequels, Fright Night got a hidden gem of a follow-up that I think is unfairly seen as not worthy, when its biggest issue is simply that it had to follow Fright Night. Part 2 was released in May of 1989, and while the first one was a success with making nearly triple its budget back, Part 2 was a bit of a flop. It had a higher budget than the first one, but brought in less than $3 million. Part of that, I'm sure, is that it was released sandwiched between Roadhouse and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That's a rough pair to try and juggle between. And who knows, maybe it was just a little too late or even too early to rejoin the adventures of Peter Vincent and Charlie Brewster. It has a good pedigree in the director's chair. Yes, just like losing Chris Sarandon as the fantastic Jerry Dandridge just kind of put you behind from the start, losing writer-director Tom Holland never helps either. Thankfully, we got a journeyman director and John Carpenter understudy, Tommy Lee Wallace, to both help write and direct. He's a legend for Halloween 3 and the It miniseries alone, but this is the cherry on top. To help him write the movie, we get Miguel Tejada Flores and Tim Metcalf. Some of the movies we cover have writers or directors that really don't have a ton else besides the Black Sheep or Best Horror Movie You Never Saw that we're covering. These guys have something behind them. Flores helped write the story for Revenge of the Nerds, Screamers, Beyond Reanimator, and Frankenstein's Army. Metcalf also did the story for Revenge of the Nerds, but also wrote the screenplay for California with a K and Bones. The original idea was to have Tom Holland return to direct, as well as Amanda Bierce and Stephen Jeffries come back as their characters, but either due to projects like 976 Evil and Child's Play for Joffries and Holland, or a lack of liking the script for Bierce, the script was rewritten to what we have now. The movie opens with a great idea that 3 years after the events, Charlie is at intense therapy to convince himself that he and actor Peter Vincent were convinced they were fighting a vampire, when in reality, he's just a serial killer. We later find out this was a case of gaslighting to get revenge. He throws away all his vampire hunting tools and weapons, and we learn that he has become estranged from Peter because in his mind, Peter killed his best friend. Charlie and his new girlfriend decide to go make amends, and Peter is very happy to see them, although he fully believes everything actually happened. He even speaks as though all these creatures are real on his Fright Night TV show. The new vampire moves into Peter Vincent's building of all places, but Charlie just shrugs it off to not fall in that same trap again. The new vampire hasn't come alone either. There's a werewolf played by Monster Squad's werewolf John Grease, a rollerblade mute vampire played by Russell Clark, and a bug-eating giant played by Brian Thompson, whose character was modeled after Brian Bosworth. Jerry Dandridge had one very memorable ally, but the sequel decides to up the ante, which works. You need to do more than just retread the same ground. The lead vampire is Regine Dandridge, played by the gorgeous Julie Carmen, and her plan is to turn Charlie into a vampire and kill Peter Vincent. She works her way in quickly, and the process starts with the typical signs of Charlie being averse to sunlight, cranky, and getting sick when he eats garlic. Charlie starts to question things and ends up at a party where people are dressing up and acting like vampires. Charlie and Peter leave convinced it's not, but then Peter uses the same mirror trick that he does in the first movie. He confronts Regine, and then we find out that her relation to Jerry and her plans. She transforms into a bat and soars past Peter. The effects in this movie are 80s-tastic in the best way. The bat looks straight out of a Ray Harryhausen movie, and we get a constant stream of cool with a holy water melting, a stomach exploding bugs out, and a vampire being melted. Just great stuff throughout that still looks good today. Peter Vincent is fired for his reckless behavior and replaced with Regine on Fright Night. Charlie loses his girlfriend and almost kills her, but is able to stop, and our heroes seem down and out. We also get a fun scene of the sidekick vampires going bowling together, with a little bit of murder thrown in. The whole angle of Regine hosting a horror TV show and hiding in plain sight is a great hook. Peter decides he needs to end her reign and tries to kill her on live TV. I know we're missing Chris Sarandon and Tom Holland, among others, but we still have Roddy McDowall. Peter Vincent, an obvious but great name that's an amalgamation of Peter Cushing and Vincent Price, is an amazing character. With respect to William Ragsdale and the other fun actors here, this is his movie, and he steals even more scenes than he did in the first one. McDowall was around forever, and while he will probably be forever known as a stalwart in the original Planet of the Apes movies, playing multiple characters in the run, he had a great career outside that. He showed up in Night Gallery, Twilight Zone, The Legend of Hell House, and a personal favorite, Class of '84, plus a couple hundred others in genre and out. Because of the, attempted murder and believing in vampires, Peter is put in an asylum while Charlie is bailed out by his psychiatrist. This is where we find out that it's all been a long con, and honestly, one of the only scenes in the movie that doesn't work for me. Charlie's girlfriend kills the doctor, or at least tries to, before he ends his own life by falling on top of the stake she put in him. With this new knowledge in tow and knowing Charlie's in some serious trouble, they go to break out Peter Vincent and head off to rescue Charlie. John Grease and his werewolf character are actually part of the new script and replaced Evil Ed, who was going to be brought back, and he does a great job here. He flirts with Alex and is just as good as a werewolf as he is a human. While he is a comic relief, he has a menace to him, especially when he tries to fight the two leads in the library, or when he places a severed head inside the ball return at the bowling alley. Unfortunately, he's also the first of the group of new baddies to die, but in a really nice touch, you can see him turning back into a human as he falls and lands on the fountain below. When Peter and Alex find Charlie, he's almost completely turned, and they have to cover him to keep him alive and from attacking them. They get caught in the hallway and seemingly are done for before Charlie uses his strength to pull the mute vampire's claws into Brian Thompson. This is where we get that great bug gut spilling practical effect. While Regine flees, they take out Belle with the same blanket they used to cover Charlie, but since she's a full vampire, she melts like she was left in the microwave too long. The final showdown happens in the elevator shaft that the vampires were keeping their coffins in, which, if I'm being honest, doesn't sound like the best idea they ever had. Regine turns into an awesome rat-bat mixture that reminds me of something out of From Dusk Till Dawn mixed with Night Shift, and they're in a race against time before she gets to them. Peter looks like he's running away, but ends up getting a piece of glass to reflect sunlight, and Jerry's sister blows up in a similar way that he does, although she makes it back to her coffin before completely falling apart. If the IMDb trivia is to be believed, fate just wasn't smiling on this particular movie. After the film wrapped, McDowall and Tom Holland met with the distributor, who happened to be Jose Menendez. Yes, that Jose Menendez. A third movie was discussed, but Menendez was tragically murdered by his sons, and in addition to a third movie not happening, it crippled this movie's distribution efforts, which wasn't helpful in its small box office. I really don't think the Roadhouse Last Crusade sandwich helped, but this is what really torpedoed it. While we didn't get a trilogy, the movie was remade with Colin Farrell in 2011, which itself got a sequel. I don't hate the remake, but it really doesn't hold a candle to the original. This sequel is leagues better than the sequel to the remake, and is honestly one of the more underrated vampire movies. It's finally getting its due soon, with a Blu-ray getting a US release for the first time. It's currently available to stream in a couple places, but physical media hounds have been left wanting for some time. Again, at least in the US market. Whether you knew there was a sequel to the original at all, or you were worried it wouldn't be worth your time, now is a great time to visit this. Its closest analog I can think of is Jaws 2. While it revisits some of the plot of the first go-around, and it's missing some of the most important elements, it's a hell of a good time and makes for a great double feature when you go back and watch the first one. Welcome to Fright Night, Part 2.
Thanks again for watching. Let us know if there's a theme that you'd like to see us cover in the future. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.